Welcome to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. This is Chris Miller. I invite you to join me as I interview artists from a variety of disciplines. We'll share powerful stories and lessons learned while making their art. Good day. This is Chris Miller with the Spiritual Artist Podcast. It's a beautiful day in Dallas today. I was surprised when I got up this morning and went outside. It's actually kind of cool for almost June. I usually go out first thing in the morning and let the dogs out. And when I went out, a little black capped chickadee came down and landed on the feeder next to me. I don't know if you know what a black capped chickadee is, but they're these delightful small birds with little black heads, and they have this nice high little voice. They're very small and one of my favorites. And it started me to think about exactly why today's guest is perfect for this podcast, because it's dealing with nature, and we're talking about the healing effects of nature. So I'm going to introduce Valerie Grimes. She is the creator of hypnotictrip.com, virtual and real life experiences that blend hiking, hypnosis, and nature to inspire powerful transformations. So good morning, Valerie.
It is a good morning. Hi, Chris. Good to have this conversation with you.
Yes, extra crisp air today, huh?
Yes, surprisingly and delightfully.
Well, I went out this morning and I sat down and I usually do that for like 10 minutes. And I just, and I'm sure you understand that because of what you do. And
there's not a better way to start the day.
Right. Well, it's funny. In my book, The Spiritual Artist, I actually frame what I call moments of awe. And that's an early chapter in the book. And it talks about before you start the creative process, which is, like you just said, kind of starting the day. And so I tell people that I used to go and I will sit and look out my window at nature. And nature is just a great way, right? I mean,
it has everything in it, everything we need.
and it has that. You can just see the system in it, right? That things are flowing and always changing, right?
Right. I like to think about water that way.
Well, so tell me, I think people are probably going, what? Hypnosis and hiking?
Probably. You're still hung up on hypnotic trip, I'm sure.
So explain this.
I had somebody tell me that I shouldn't call it hypnotic trip because they said, oh, that sounds like psychedelics and et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, in some parts of the country, psychedelics, microdosing is becoming popular. And I think that's a dangerous idea because, being in nature can afford us the same benefits as taking a trip on psychedelics. And, let's try that first, right? So I wasn't afraid to call it hypnotic trip. I've been a hypnotherapist for 20 years. And so I've gotten kind of immune to, to all those jokes or whatever about it. I know firsthand the benefits of being in a state of hypnosis and hiking. And so, 20 years ago when I started hiking, when I also became a hypnotist, I saw the two little distinction between the two, that, when you're in nature, you're in a hypnotic state, you're in a trance. And so I thought to myself, why not blend these things together? I created that during COVID to give people a virtual experience, a virtual hypnotic trip, through Zoom or through the phone.
So you'll have to explain this. So this morning when I went outside and I just kind of ground myself in the world around me, how is that like hypnosis? I mean, how am I putting myself in a hypnotic state when I do that?
You are. So if I can compare it to being in my office, so someone comes in because they want to work on anxiety. So they've already decided that they're going to start improving their life in some way. So they're open to it. They're relaxed when they come in. And then I guide them into a state of mind that allows the conscious world around us to start to go away. The details of the day start to melt away, fade away. And they're just in a state which we create together, the client and I, where their mind is more open and receptive. And so in the office, it takes about 5 minutes, 8 minutes to guide them into that state. But you automatically step into that when you step out of nature. I'm not sure why that is, but I suspect that it's because we are from the natural world. The natural world and us go together beautifully. We feel at home there. I like to tell people we are still primitive. Certain aspects of ourselves are still primitive. We used to sleep outside under the stars. So I think the DNA is triggered when we step outside and we just go, thank you. Feels so good.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah, I don't have a scientific explanation for it.
Well, it's, I've always thought, I talk about, for me, when I'm doing some sort of a repetitive task, it's when I think the clearest. If I mow the lawn and I'm just going back and forth and back and forth,
Yeah.
Or washing dishes, and I'm wondering if there's some sort of relationship of that when you're hiking. I mean, are you, because you're in this mechanical motion,
Yes.
meditative motion?
Yeah, that's a great point. There's the steps, there's passing the trees. You said back and forth and back and forth, and I thought about that old adage of the clock. Look,
Oh,
him just swinging the clock or the pendulum back and forth and back.
That's so funny.
Of
course you would see that,
and
right?
that puts,
Yeah.
so when I don't do that in my sessions, but that is how they show on TV. Someone being hypnotized, you stare at that and you watch that go back and forth. I wonder about these tennis matches, or people
Well, I'm sure
in trance.
I've watched baseball games and there's this motion of the game, as they run the plates that you kind of do. Your mind is, it puts you down. Here's where we're going to go, I guess.
Okay.
It puts you into your subconscious, maybe tapping you into your subconsciousness.
So yeah, when the conscious mind slows down because we become engaged in something that doesn't require our thinking, it allows the subconscious activity spontaneously increases. So the conscious mind slows down, the subconscious mind speeds up, and this has been recorded through different studies over the last 50 so years that show that the cognitive thinking part of your brain, the frontal lobe, does slow down quite a bit in a hypnotic state. And it allows, so it's like the meditation. When we sit there long enough, if we can sit there in seated meditation long enough, we can eventually quiet the mind. I have to write. I have to actually get out my journal and write down, this is a really good day. Today's a really good day. I'm happy today. I'm having fun today. It's a peaceful day. Everything's always working out for me today, or whatever. I can't sit there and think of that in my head. I have to put the focus on the paper, and that allows the conscious mind to to wander, sort of just wanders off. And so that puts me in a hypnotic state to do it that way. So writing is that state of mind as well. Painting, walking, repetitive household chores, driving long distances. Those are all hypnotic states, and we all go into hypnosis every day. We just don't realize it.
I love that. I'm probably going to mutilate this, but it's I'm sure you've heard that phrase. Chop wood, carry water. Is that how it goes? Chop wood, carry water.
Yeah, or after laundry is ecstasy.
Well, there is something about that, right? There, I think I learned instead of rushing through those day-to-day tasks, to actually savor them and let that motion, I actually had my son actually came up to me the other day, and he was watching me wash the dishes, and he goes, "You actually like that, don't you?" And I was like, "No, I don't like it, but I've learned to surrender to it, and be in
Yeah,
the moment, be
I'm
present."
delighting to it. It's delightful. Yes.
It's delightful to wash dishes, but when we take any task like that and come to terms with it, just be present with it. See, Valerie, I think you and I are probably similar. I grew up with parents that I kept a to-do list and very type A background, and we had a list of do this, do this, do this, and right, and so to learn to not rush through that to-do list.
Yes. Yes. Very true. I've been called a type A Zen.
And
So
so in a way, this process that you do, this hypnotic trip, would probably appeal to a lot of people like that.
yeah, I've taken out about four or five groups so far since February, and they show up so bravely and not really sure what it's all going to be. And I say, we're just walking in nature. Just think of it that way. We're just all going to take a walk together. And they at the end of it, they say, "Oh my God, that was so amazing." I tuned in. I do a walking meditation. I learned this from Brother Chi Sing of Dallas Meditation Center. Um, so he lives on. He passed away several years ago, but he lives on through many of us that followed him. So this walking meditation, I have them just focus on their visuals. So they're taking in only what they're seeing, the colors, the shapes, the contrasts, and to just narrow down only to what visually is around them, tuning everything else out. And then I'll time it for 3 minutes. And then I'll say, "Okay, everyone, let's gather." So we stop and they share, like, "Wow, I've never noticed how the sun streams down through the trees." And then we move to just sounds. And then the best one is the physical body. Like for 3 minutes, just focus on how your physical body feels walking out here, And it's so wonderful to have them all share, and they all have a different experience, and that's the best part of the hike. And it's funny because without me, they would if they would just show up and do their own hike, they would probably have the same experience. But it sometimes takes a person like myself to guide them out there and to show them these things. And we also do. I teach them self hypnosis as well, and then depending on the hike and the people, I'll do at the midpoint of the hike a self hypnosis or hypnosis guided visualization, depending on what the group is experiencing. If I get the feeling that they're all having, a really difficult time or struggling, I talk to them individually as we're walking along, and then so I guide them through processing out the old and bringing in the new ideas.
Well, wow. There's so much you said. I'm like, okay, I could talk about this. I could talk about that. So first, you mentioned that you have them tune into certain aspects, like whether that's color or shape. Do you think people have different strengths in that area, like that they gravitate towards certain things?
Yes, some people won't comment on the visuals. Some will, the ones that don't comment on the visuals will say more about how their body felt
So
or the
some
sound
are
they heard.
some are more kinesthetic, some are more
Yes,
visual, and some are more audio. They hear things maybe.
yes. And then I use that information when I do the guided imagery. I make sure that I state, or the suggestions are stated in a way that the majority of the group will benefit from it.
Oh, I love that. So
So I'm learning about them.
I get it. Yeah. So you're learning how they communicate.
Yes.
Oh, what was that book? The came out many years ago. About how people speak in love, the 5 love languages. Do you remember that book?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
It's sort of like that.
It is. Yeah. It's about communication, and hypnosis is only suggestive therapy. So if I don't understand how they take in information, those suggestions that they give them, you know, may not have a good chance of making an impression. I know you were in advertising and I was in advertising too. And we understood that, when people are flipping through a magazine or watching TV, they're in a trance. And so our next job is to appeal to an emotion that they're having or that we want them to have. So we communicate that in a way that, will really affect the majority of the people who are watching or viewing.
How interesting. I never thought about that. When you're flipping through a magazine, it is a kinesthetic.
You're in trance.
It's a trance, right?
You're
Flip,
in
flip,
trance,
flip, flip,
yes.
flip, flip. Yeah. And so let's share that with the listeners, because I think we've talked about this before, and you've said that some people, they hear that word hypnosis and immediately, I'm a control freak. I admit it. I get like, whoa, you're not going to control me. And I see pictures of, the hypnotist bringing people up on the stage and making them quack like a duck, and immediately I'm like, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And the way you describe it, this is not something you should be afraid of.
Right. It's people say, "Well, I don't want you to control my mind," and I'm like, "Well, your mind is already controlling you. So, do you like how your mind is controlling you?" And that's probably not a very accurate way to say that, but since our birth, all of our experiences have been registered at some level in the unconscious mind as a positive or a negative experience. And the subconscious can only express what it has in it. What's there can only be expressed. So that's why you can say, "Well, I can't believe you don't like broccoli." Well, I don't, because this mother made me eat it and I don't like it. "Well, how can you not like it? It's so good." "I'm sorry, I don't like it. Stop." It's our experiences that we can only express from those experiences. And so if we don't like, I remember one of your podcasts, you were talking about the critical factor that you have, and the unconscious criticizing that happens, and you do that in a very light way. And I realized, I was listening to that, and I realized that that's an unconscious thing that you don't have the conscious control over. And so the mind is controlling you're doing something you really did not want to do. And so hypnotherapy accesses that tendency or that part of you to realize that in the past that was something you learned, but in the current and in the future, it's not really something that you want to continue to do. And I would like you to please talk about how you're really not a critical person. I don't want the listeners to think that. Maybe explain what you know.
Well, what's interesting. Well, what I'd love to point out here and share once again with my listeners is to remember that our mind. I like this story. Our mind is a tool. It's just like our body. It's a tool. It's not who we are. Eckhart Tolle talks about we are the watcher behind the tool. And so I think what Valerie's saying here is that tool can get out of control. Our mind, because it has sucked up every experience that we've ever had, good, bad, ugly, and it's in there. And so we'll often make decisions based on these subconscious baggage maybe, right? This history, these suitcases that we've built up. And my suitcase might be, I have to keep a to-do list. I'm only effective if I have a to-do list. And so I come back to it and I go, wait, is that true? Is it true that I need to have an action item list, or am I motivated enough? Do I know what I want? And so when you're talking about hypnosis, you're going back to that mind level, right? That subconscious, did you say, or unconscious?
It's either one.
Mhm.
Subconscious is usually the one I use mostly. Um, but it's the unconscious mind, meaning that we're not conscious of it.
So,
It resides below our conscious awareness.
and so part of it is being aware of watching those thoughts. I do say that in my book also, is watching myself think. When I paint, you know, I'm watching my thoughts. I started painting the stroke and I would hear my mother's voice, you can't be an artist, or artists don't make money, or how arrogant, how selfish to be an artist. That's a message we often get.
Okay.
And so what you do with hypnosis is help people counter that messaging.
Yes, right. So that's an association or identification, that critical voice. It sounds like you learn that through mom and listening to her do that. And so in hypnotherapy, we actually can talk to the child aspect, or the part of you that is doing that behavior. And this gets a little kind of complicated to explain, but to talk to that part of you with the current 2021 adult reasoning mind, and bring that information back to the child aspect to say, do you really want to continue using this voice? You have the ability now to transform it. And it's like creating an inner cooperation, an inner conversation with the different aspects or the different voices, the different parts of you, and come to an agreement that, well, that was then, this is now. And it has a very fascinating, spontaneous response that helps people to stop doing what they were formerly doing, just by examining at that deeper level.
So they are still in control. It's
Yeah. Oh yes, absolutely. I've had people um, tell me, in a hypnotic session, even in a trance state, to bug off. They didn't say it that nicely. For example, if you're trying to have someone do something they really don't want to do, for instance, people come in to stop drinking or to stop smoking, and I'm talking, having a conversation while they're in trance with the part of them that drinks or the part of them that smokes. And if they really don't want to stop that because they believe it is serving a positive purpose, then they'll ignore me, they won't participate, and they may terminate the trance and just open their eyes and say, oh, this isn't working. But all that means is we need to create more conversation, in that, um, for that part of them to find the cooperation and be part of what the conscious self wants to be. And eventually, if they stick with it, that will come about. So what that means is, yes, the client, the subject, is very much in control because they didn't take what I was suggesting. They stopped the trance, and people can do that at any time.
So if I'm repeating this back wrong, let me know. But
Okay.
so we're taking our 2021 self and
Hmm.
and going back and listening to all those voices that were built in all those other years, and we're deciding, okay, do I still need to keep a to-do list? I mean, I'm
Right.
giving it a very
Right.
safe place, but it could be, do I still need to drink or smoke or eat too much food? And then we kind of go, maybe I do. I mean, we can discuss it. Or
Right. So you're able to look at the pattern and the reasons why, and to understand them with your adult reasoning mind, because before we're 12, we don't have that critical factor. And so everything that we've experienced just goes into the subconscious without, you know, the critical factor, without analyzing it. So we just accept it as fact, especially something that comes from parents, something that's repeated to us over and over, through traumatic experiences. So the subconscious becomes fixed with ideas through those ways. And so coming into a hypnotic state, the adult gets to look at those old ideas and decide whether they want to keep them or not.
Mm.
And you get an opportunity to evaluate them.
Well, let me ask you this, Valerie, because with this is great technology. So how did you get into it? Because I mean, you have to be a pretty brave soul, I think, to face your demons, so to speak.
Yes. Well, most people come because they've tried everything else. So I was running an advertising agency in 1998 or 99. And I was drinking coffee in the morning, drinking alcohol at night, not dealing with the stress, just pushing through, and not even aware that I was a problem.
Uh-huh.
My son was 11, and he said, this is when I became aware. He said, "Mom, you're no fun anymore." That woke me up, but I still didn't know really what to do, how to get out of this thing I had created, this crazy treadmill I was on. So the rug got pulled out from under me. My three main clients were bought by one big conglomerate manufacturer, and within 3 months, they all disappeared. And it was 20 years since I was in that industry, from when I was 18 to 38, and I was exhausted. So I was kind of glad, but then I was also angry. I got a call from Ann Wilson of the Dallas Hypnosis Training Institute, and she said, "Valerie, I remember working with you a couple of years ago. It was an industrial brochure project, and they did recycled glass." And she said, "You're really good at making difficult things sell. I have a hypnosis school, and I need you to help me market that school." And I thought, a hypnosis what? I'm like,
Wow.
I needed the client. So I went and met with her, and she was just so professional. And I thought, wow, this hypnosis is a very professional, legitimate practice. Anyway, I did the brochure, and you'll appreciate this. So I hand her the proof, the final proof, and she looks at it and she says, "Oh, this is really lovely, dear, but can I make a comment?" And I thought, oh,
No.
no, I didn't know this job. So I said, "Sure." And I started straightening my suit and my hair. And she goes, "No, no, dear, you look lovely. But it looks like you're having a hard time holding it together."
Oh
Oh
my
my
God.
God. She saw right through me. And,
Talk
I
about
was wearing
vulnerable.
a linen suit, and I had my shoulder bag, my satchel, and, I thought I looked really professional, but she saw right through me. And I just started to cry in her office like a baby, like snot was like
Oh
coming.
my God. Well, what
Just
talk
like,
about talk
she just had
about
this way of helping me to let go. And then she goes, "Why don't you come in for a couple of sessions?" And I'm like, "Okay." You know, I didn't know what else to do. So she really helped me process through all the pain and all the stress of working, for my dad. I didn't mention that. I worked for my dad for 15 years, and then for 5 years trying to follow in his footsteps to make his company successful, and all while ignoring my family and myself. So when she said, "Why don't you sign up for the school?" She said, "It's like kind of the same thing, hypnosis. You're boiling down what people are telling you into some suggestions. That's advertising. And so I signed up for her school, and I opened a practice in 2000. So
Valerie, we think about the synchronicity of that, right? I think about it. You're in
I
this
know.
construction industry, and this comes to you. It was a gift.
I
It's
know.
like it's a gift from spirit
I know.
directing you onto the right path. Which I really do believe. I believe that if we listen, spirit is talking to us all the time. And obviously you were willing to listen, whether it was because it sounded so horrible where you were,
Yeah.
you know, emotionally and situationally. Situationally, it's not who you are; it's just the situation you were in. And suddenly, look at that. I mean, it's just amazing. And
It's people say, "Oh, it's so awful right now." I'm like, well, it needs to be, so you can see it. People have all these problems and they want their lives to be happy all the time, but it's in this the sadness and the sorrow and the that we can, I think spirit finally gets our attention, and we're willing, we're crumbling to our knees. I was on my knees, and very I was listening. I wanted to know what to do. I fell apart. Pema
Wow.
Chodron has a book, When Things Fall Apart, and I read that many, many times. And what's wonderful, I don't have to read those books anymore.
And who was that author again?
Um, Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist monk.
Oh wow, I haven't read that book.
Yeah, I
I'll have
have
to,
it. I'll give it to you.
I do. I love, me, I love reading books. So I think there is a value to when things, if we get to that point too, and now you can see that as a gift, now hopefully you can look back and say, okay, that situation with the job and with my father and all that was actually a gift because it got me here.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't change it.
Wow.
Mm.
So I think that also must make you pretty empathetic to people that come in with their own issues. And
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I've experienced everything: deaths, loss of businesses, loss of a parent, child, um, strings of relationships that didn't work, financial difficulty, raising a child as a single mom.
yes.
So there's just a couple of things that I haven't experienced, and I used to think, why am I having such a hard time? But it's to help keep me humble and honest, and I'm always striving to move up and out. You know, um,
I talked to this Weaver several episodes back, an HSP Weaver, and she used the term dark night of the soul. I had never heard that before.
Whoa.
And it sounds to me that that's what you experienced. It's a dark night. And she said it's an incredible shift where the situation gets so overpowering, but it's truly a dark night of the soul. And then you transform out into this butterfly, this new creation.
Yeah, there's in the religious and the Christian teachings, the Bible, I think the Bible's opening line is "Let there be light." And like to tell my clients that, the ones that are believers, because a lot of Christians will say, "Well, are you a Christian?" And I'll say, "Yeah, sure."
They're not
If that
exclusive.
makes you feel better. Um,
Yes.
but I said, God was showing us that we can speak into existence what we want. Let there be light. I don't know. So I stay in the light. That's when things feel dark. I find myself saying, "Let there be light." When I open my meditation, I light a candle and I say, "Let there be light." And if we, stepping out into nature, stepping out into a path with the sunlight, you're in the light. Nature is very healing. As Wayne Dyer used to say, nature has intention built into it, and we just get to step into that. And that's what got me through that difficult transition. Being in nature, hiking became my church. It was where I solved problems, where I felt connected to spirit.
Let's talk about this a little bit. So let's say I signed up and I was going on one of your hikes. How does that start? How do we meet somewhere, and then do you meditate first? Do we just start walking? I mean, how?
Yeah. We gather around, and you can see people, shifting back and forth, and they're like checking their pack and their shoes, and I let them be nervous. I don't try to calm them down, because the escape is on that trail. And the first 15 or 20 minutes, I say, talk amongst yourselves. We have to turn off our phones. They can still take pictures, but no, silence the phones. And so the first 15 or 20 minutes, they're just talking and pointing at things, getting to know each other. And then we start with the guided, meditations. And then I talk to them individually to find out, why are you on this hike today? And this one guy says, I just need to find some healing. And so we talked a little more about that. And, they start, what's so wonderful, they don't know each other. And these people start helping each other, but not like in a codependent way.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you need healing? Well, I'm a Reiki master. I'm going to heal you right now. It's not like that. They're just listening to each other and encouraging each other. And there was one girl that was really afraid of snakes. And this guy was just talking to her and saying, snakes they're good. They're really so important in the environment. And, they're out there off the trail. They're not on the trail. And if they are, just wait, throw a stick, and they'll pass by. And I wish we would have seen one, but we didn't. But, that was really kind of him to take the time to explain to her, to help her through her fear. And in the end, she was like leading. It's funny how I start off leading and then I let someone else take, I don't want to be the leader, the trail boss, And then she was like leading us out on the way back. And I told everyone too, hey, if you want to hike on, we did that with 7 miles. I said, if you want to keep hiking, just go. This is the turnaround point. It was 3.5 miles. We're going to go back. Nobody wanted to go on. They all wanted to stay together. And when it was over, I'm like, y'all can go now. You can get your cars going. No, they still were just talking. And so it was really beautiful.
Like
to
creates
watch
this.
Strangers come together like that.
Well, I was thinking back about that snake story. So much of what we think, in so many things we think that are dangerous or bad, it's just our perspective, right?
And we've been hypnotized to believe that the number 13 is unlucky. It used to be a good number before I think it was the Gregorian calendar. Snakes used to be spiritual.
Well, interesting. I have noticed a lot of ravens following me lately. And I'm like, at first I was like, what does this mean? And actually, when you look it up, the raven has a lot of positive attributes.
Yeah.
But my initial thing was, Edgar Allan Poe.
You're a warlock.
Right. Why are they coming after me? And I started realizing, it really is how our mind, what beliefs we've let develop in our head about it.
Right.
And if we separate from those beliefs and go, okay, I can choose to think of ravens as scary things that are coming down in my yard, or they're actually bringing me intelligence and good news. And how do I get to choose. I get to choose how I see those ravens.
Yeah, that's wonderful. But being in nature helped you to do that. Being outside helped you to do that. If you were inside at your desk working on a project and you saw one in your yard, I don't think you would have easily made that connection. You wouldn't have come around to the spiritual connection. Symbols are so important, and the brain works through symbolizing symbols and signals. The subconscious mind, I should say, has a lot of symbolism. And when we see that, we automatically go right to whatever that assigned meaning is.
Wow, Valerie, that just reminds me, I don't know if you listened to my last podcast with a lucid dreamer, but I was talking about symbols. And I think you can't let someone else determine those symbols for you,
Yes.
because you have to take the time to think about how you view that symbol. So if I had a raven in one of my dreams, it's how I view it. Do I view it as a bearing good luck, or a threat to my health? That's important. And on a subconscious level, it's interesting. So you believe that we're symbols, we're creatures of symbolism.
Right. So think about coffee.
Mm-hmm.
What comes to mind? Just thinking about coffee.
Morning and kind of cozy and warm for me.
Yeah. So that's the symbolism behind coffee. Some people might think of it and say, oh, that tastes bitter. It's horrible. Maybe they remember coffee breath on a parent. And so they may not like coffee as an adult because of those imprints, in childhood of dad's coffee breath. Um, so our whole day plays out based on all those symbols, all those feelings, and the meaning that was attached to them before we were 12 years old. It's kind of scary and fascinating at the same time.
Well, I think it's scary at first when you learn it, but it's empowering when you use hypnotism and you take charge of it. When you finally say, hey, I don't have to believe these things just because I was told them or had an experience when I was young. I can reframe it.
It reminds me of a client that came in to stop drinking alcohol, and we went back. We do regressions a lot. That's a part of the practice. And so we regressed back. It was the smell of it that he really used. I love how bourbon smells. It smells so good. I'm like, aha. Okay. I don't say that to them. So we followed back the smell of that when he first learned to like the smell of bourbon. And it was when he was about 3 or 4 years old, sitting in mama's lap, and he remembers her breath and the clinking of the ice cubes in the glass, the cocktail, as she's raising it up to take a sip. So that was when he got mama's love. He sat on her lap and she was such in a good mood and she was holding him. And all the while he's just breathing in the smell of bourbon. So
Wow.
he drinks to feel comfort. And, you try to take that away from him through one of these other programs, and it's not going to work because you're trying to take mom's love. He's associated that. So we undid that and helped him to see that, mom's love was maybe, I don't remember, not available at all, but whatever it was a long time. I don't remember what I did, but we disconnected.
That it was separate from
that was not love. That smell is not the love.
Valerie, okay, so I'm going to share something with my listeners that a lot of people don't know. I was for many years, I was sort of like a hidden smoker. I would smoke. I'm seeing Valerie's facial expression. Yes. And I equated it. This is interesting. Looking back on it, to me, smoking a cigarette was freedom. It was independence. And it also signified creativity. Like when I smoked a cigarette, it was when I stepped back and looked at life and I could be creative. And I would sit down and I would smoke a cigarette and then write, or smoke a cigarette and paint. And it was sort of like this ritual. Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is I've equated that with something that it's really not.
Right. Yeah, we assign that symbolism to it. And that's what we, as hypnotherapists, we undo that so that the client can be free of smoking or drinking or eating too much. Because smoking does not calm a person down. It revs up the nervous system. But because
I always think of it as, Valerie, I always think of it as a calming down. I take that cigarette, I'm in control now. Right?
No, the chemicals in a cigarette rev up your nervous system. It's not a good thing.
And so I have to realize that I can have that feeling. I can have that feeling with a painting or with a work of art without.
Right. So maybe just taking smokers want to inhale. They're inhaling, so maybe just taking those 2 deep inhales. A lot of times we just want to breathe, because breathing gets us in that same state.
See, I'm taking a deep breath.
3 of them. That's the magic of 3.
And I always thought that was a design rule.
I asked that in class. I'm like, why do they have to take 3 deep breaths? And she said, it's the magic of 3. I'm like, okay.
It's another belief, right? If you believe the magic of 3.
Yeah, I don't think she knew. So she was just saying, it's the magic of 3.
So I have a question about the hike.
Okay.
You said that you lead meditation. I'm curious, do you have them all sit down, or do you actually do it while they walk?
We're walking. Yeah, I'm active. That's why people call me that type A Zen. Meditation, seated meditation is difficult. So walking, I feel like I'm accomplishing. Walking, I'm exercising. I'm doing something, accomplishing something,
Right.
and meditating at the same time. So a lot of people, when they want to hike, they want the activity. But the first mile or two, we do stop a lot. Then after that, I just let them go at their own pace because they are there to hike. And each hike, I try to have a theme. That one that we did at Ray Roberts in May was Mother's Day, but it wasn't on Mother's Day, but it was honoring Mother Earth. And then the one we're going to do the last Sunday of June is going to honor Father, Son. So I try to bring in nature in that way. And but they all have different themes. So there's one in September and there's one in October also.
So in like you said, it's that walking, repetitive, physical movement. It's that quiets that conscious mind.
Yeah.
It gets to a deeper level.
Yeah. It's hypnotic. It's hypnotic hiking.
Well, I've enjoyed this interview, but I want to ask you one last thing. If you were to tell the listeners what they could do right now with nature, how could they do this on their own?
So to go outside the backyard, a park, they don't have to drive to a state park to do this, or find a tree, take off your shoes and just feel the earth beneath your feet. Feel the earth. And if you know where north is, face north. And then turn to the right, and that's the east. And then focus on the wind and just notice the wind. And then turning to the right, that's the south. Notice the fire, maybe the sun or the moon, the light, or just kind of focus on a passion. And then turning again to the west is the water element. And if there's some water nearby, notice that, or just the fluid nature within. So you've covered the directions, you've covered the elements in 2 minutes, and then you're in a pretty good state of mind at that point.
You've also covered, I don't know if you realize that, is the way people communicate. Because you said feel with your feet, that's kinesthetic.
Oh.
Right. And then see, it's interesting. You're covering you're touching them. How do they communicate? What is their 3 levels of communication?
Yeah.
In that,
I didn't even realize the correlation.
Yeah, because I was listening as you said, I was like, touch with your feet, and then you see something, and then you hear something. I'm like, oh, how funny. So you're making sure. I think we all communicate in all 3 channels. I just do think that we resonate stronger with one or the other. Whether you're a visual person or a kinesthetic person.
Right.
And I do think hiking is a wonderful tool for kinesthetic. Well, this has been a great experience.
The art of nature.
Yes, I really like it. I'm excited to have you on, and I'm sure we will connect again soon, right?
Yeah, hope so.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to the Spiritual Artist Podcast. Whether you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, make sure you choose the subscribe button so you'll receive new segments when they're released. Plus, check out my new book, The Spiritual Artist, now available on Amazon.com. In the meantime, be still, listen, and know that you are a spiritual artist.